What if the chair you are sitting in right now isn't actually a physical object, but like just a frozen thought?
Mm.
We go through our days treating the physical universe as this fixed container. You knock on wood, it's solid, and you just navigate whatever reality throws at you.
Right, yeah.
But today, we are exploring a philosophical framework that claims the physical world doesn't dictate your mind at all.
Instead, your mind literally built the physical universe.
Exactly. Welcome to the deep dive. Our source today is an essay by an author named Shui Feng titled Consciousness Determines Existence. And it attempts to settle one of the oldest debates in human history.
Are we making the world, or is the world making us?
Right. And this isn't just dry dorm room philosophy.
Oh, definitely not. It's the classic tension between materialism, so existence determines consciousness, and idealism,
Yeah.
where consciousness determines existence. But Wifang doesn't approach it with abstract math or dense academic theory.
Yeah, the author grounds it in reality.
Exactly. What makes this text so compelling is how the author grounds this massive question in everyday human behavior. The stakes here are framed as absolute.
Yeah.
The essay argues that how you answer this single question dictates whether you live as an animal trapped by survival instincts or as an elevated being capable of unlocking what the author calls 36-dimensional spaces.
Which is just a wild concept to throw out there. So if you're listening to this, you might be wondering, where you fall on that spectrum. Have you ever wondered why you view the world completely differently than your neighbor?
According to our source, you might actually be operating on a completely different level of human existence.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the author's argument, we first need to look at how the source divides the human population based on their relationship to the material world.
Right. And instead of just listing them out, it's really a story of progression.
Yeah, the author establishes 5 distinct categories of humanity. And the first 3 describe people who are fundamentally tethered to the physical world.
They are essentially slaves to reality.
Exactly. The author starts with what they call ignorant people. According to the text, these individuals live purely by instinct. If you drop them on a deserted island, they wouldn't try to master the environment.
They would just die.
They just die. For them, physical existence is absolutely everything.
Yeah, without physical input, their internal world just goes dark. And that reliance on external input scales up to the next category, right? The ladies.
The lady.
These are individuals driven entirely by desires, money, status, beauty. The text argues that a lady literally cannot live a single day without the seduction of something external to chase.
Wow.
Their daily consciousness is completely dictated by the pursuit of obtaining more existence.
And then the third group, mortals, might sound a bit more noble at first glance because the author argues they live by affection.
Like family and relationship.
Yeah, family, relatives, their nation, their clan, their entire consciousness is anchored to those things. But the author points out a crucial vulnerability here. If you take away those external connections, mortals feel empty, bored, and lonely. Their internal world collapses without an external structure to hold it up. So existence still determines their consciousness.
Which really highlights the psychological chasm between those first 3 levels and the final 2. If you are an ignorant person, a laity, or a mortal, you are just reacting.
Right.
But when we cross over to the 4th level, the sages, the dynamic starts to flip. Sages live by reason. These are the scientists and philosophers who ask why.
For a sage, existence and consciousness are equally important, but they lean heavily into consciousness. They dedicate massive amounts of energy to the realm of thought.
But sages still need that physical starting point. It's the 5th level, the saints or immortals, where the tether is completely cut.
It's almost like a video game skill tree. At level 1, you're just reacting to the map to survive.
I like that analogy.
But by level 5, you have the developer codes and realize you can actually build the map yourself. Because the author says saints rely entirely on spirituality.
Right? Physical senses like sight or touch are totally meaningless to them. What matters is spiritual perception.
Yeah.
For saints, consciousness entirely determines existence.
But, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that leap. How does someone just ignore their physical senses? If you ignore physical reality, how do you even survive?
Well, the author's argument is that saints aren't bound by the mechanics of basic survival anymore. Their consciousness operates on a different frequency entirely.
Okay.
But the text actually anticipates that exact skepticism from us. The author explicitly notes that if you try to explain consciousness determines existence to the first 3 groups, it's like casting pearls before swine.
Wait, really? The text says that?
Yeah, that's a direct phrase. The text even suggests they might give you a back kick for suggesting it.
A back kick. That's intense.
It really sets up the author's clear bias here. To a mortal or a laity, the physical world is too heady, too real to be dismissed as just a product of the mind. So they reject the idea violently.
That sets up a pretty intense hierarchy right out of the gate. It establishes that believing your mind creates reality is the ultimate elevated human state.
Exactly.
But it's one thing to claim our minds make the physical world, it's another to actually prove it. How does the author demonstrate this in our everyday lives? Because if I sit here and imagine a car doesn't just materialize in my driveway.
No, no.
That sounds like magic.
Right, but what's fascinating here is how the author uses everyday objects to prove this massive philosophical point. It's not magic, it's about the sequence of creation.
Okay, lay it on me.
The author asks us to look at the artificial objects that surround us. Let's stick with the car example. A car didn't grow out of the dirt, right? Earth, in its natural physical state, possessed no cars.
No, they definitely didn't appear out of thin air.
Exactly. So if physical existence truly determined consciousness, our minds would only ever be capable of reflecting the rocks, trees, and dirt that were already here. We wouldn't be able to conceive of anything beyond what the planet naturally provided.
Ah, I see. So the argument is that the concept of the car had to exist as a fully formed thought before a single piece of steel was ever bent.
Precisely. A car was imagined in the consciousness first, and then built. The author applies this to everything, from the first house ever built to modern fashion.
Oh, fashion makes sense. A fashion designer realizes a trend in their brain first, right?
Yeah, that internal realization dictates the physical cutting of the fabric, which then becomes the clothes that guide the global trend.
So the physical clothes are just a downstream symptom of the designer's consciousness.
That's it. Without human imagination and thinking, no artificial objects would exist. Consciousness is the singular spark.
Okay, I can follow that logic for a dress or a house. Individual thoughts create individual objects. But the text doesn't stop there, does it?
Not at all. It scales this concept up massively.
Right. If individual thoughts create individual objects, what happens when collective thoughts create societies? The deep dive scales up from objects to living environments?
Yes, the essay moves from the micro to the macro, examining how environments serve as mirrors of a collective mind.
And this is where the author gets incredibly specific, making some cultural observations to prove the point. The author contrasts the living environments of different groups to argue that physical surroundings are a direct reflection of consciousness, not geography.
The text looks specifically at residences in Zimbabwe over a 10-year period, comparing Caucasian homes with Chinese homes.
Right. According to the author, the Caucasian environments were characterized by tidy spaces, mowed lawns, clean kitchens, and floral washrooms.
Well, in stark contrast, the author describes the Chinese living environments they observed as messy, filled with overgrown weeds and greasy. The author then literally asks, aren't they all human? Why the big difference?
And the essay's answer is that the difference has absolutely nothing to do with physical existence. It is entirely a manifestation of differing consciousness.
The author even uses an anecdote about their own child visiting New York City to back this up.
Oh, right, the Chinatown anecdote. The child called to complain that New York's Chinatown was dirty, which completely clashed with the surrounding prosperity of the city.
And for the author, this is definitive proof. You can move a population to a completely different, prosperous physical existence like New York, but their environment will still default to reflecting their internal consciousness.
They even propose this radical hypothetical thought experiment. They posit that if Chinese populations swapped countries with Japanese and Germans,
Literally relocating everyone entirely.
yeah, within 50 years, China would become graceful and beautiful, while Japan and Germany would become dirty and disorderly.
That's a bold claim.
Now, looking at these sources, we have to acknowledge the author is making some sweeping generalizations here. Does the author account for historical, economic, or systemic existences that might shape an environment? Or is it purely a consciousness issue?
This raises an important question, because it is an extreme stance. But according to the text, the author genuinely believes consciousness is the singular root cause.
So there's absolutely no accounting for historical context or infrastructure.
No, to the author, an economic system doesn't just fall from the sky. It is built by the collective consciousness of the people. So any economic disadvantage is just another downstream symptom.
I see. So if we look at a building, we aren't looking at available materials or engineering constraints. We're looking at a physical shadow of a belief system.
Yes, the text brings in architectural examples to prove this. Islamic mosques, Christian churches, and Buddhist temples look fundamentally different because the spiritual consciousness of the builders is different.
And the text scales this up to entire city grids. The author compares Harare, the capital of Zimbabwe, with Beijing.
Right. In Harare, commercial, industrial, and residential areas are separated by at least a kilometer.
But in Beijing, those areas are entirely intertwined. And the author attributes this pattern not to population density, but purely to the fact that the British and the Chinese have different consciousnesses regarding how space should be used.
A city of millions is just a macro-level version of the fashion designer's dress. But the author doesn't just restrict this framework to physical space. The deep dive expands into the concept of time, too.
Showing how consciousness shapes entirely different worlds across eras. The comparison of women's fashion in China is such a vivid example of this.
Oh, absolutely.
The author uses the Cultural Revolution as proof that when a society restricts consciousness, the physical reality literally loses its color and shape. During the Cultural Revolution, consciousness dictated yellow, gray, and blue clothes.
Women had to find ways to press their breasts down.
Yeah, and there was an absolute ban on skirts, high heels, makeup. Deviating meant being labeled a hot, foxy spirit descending on the world.
Which is a dangerous accusation of flirting and restlessness. The physical existence of that era was drab because the consciousness was so heavily policed.
But then the author points to the present day. Today, the consciousness has shifted to individuality, freedom, and curvaceous beauty.
Making modern women look like, quote, fairies descended to the world.
The physical reality of the streets completely transformed because the consciousness shifted.
And the author argues that varying global demographics and political systems are also just manifestations of different consciousnesses. The essay throws out a series of rhetorical questions here.
Right, like why does the U.S. population grow slower than China or India? Why do couples with higher IQs or more wealth tend to have fewer children?
Why is the U.S. president limited to 2 terms while leaders in other countries serve many?
Or why are most Nobel Prize winners American and not from mainland China? So what does this all mean?
To the author, the answer to every single one of those questions is identical. Human consciousness. Americans aren't biologically different. They just operate on a different collective consciousness.
I really appreciate how the author synthesizes all of these massive geopolitical questions with a very simple food analogy.
Oh, the hamburger analogy.
Yeah. The author says if you want hamburgers, you definitely don't make noodles. Americans and Chinese just have different collective goals in their consciousness, so they cook up completely different physical realities.
It's pure direct causality. And the author scales this up to the ultimate creator. How was the Earth itself born?
Right.
The essay attributes the very existence of the physical universe, the planets and plants and animals, to the consciousness of what it calls the greatest creator. The thought of the universe had to precede the physical matter.
Okay, so we've traveled from a designer imagining a dress to the greatest creator imagining the cosmos. But how does this grand philosophical theory apply to your individual future?
That is the big question.
Because it's fascinating to talk about the universe, but the author lands the plane with a specific critique of a modern anecdote, and it's about a college student.
Yes, the essay examines a review article the author read recently, critiquing a college student who hadn't even graduated yet.
This student's long-term plan was to go to the U.S., build a villa with a green lawn, a private pool, and own a Mercedes-Benz. It's a very specific vision of physical existence.
But the reviewer who wrote the article tore this student apart. They ridiculed the dream as wishful thinking and advised the student to face reality and be down to earth.
The ultimate materialist perspective. Looking at the student's current physical limitations and demanding those limits dictate what they are allowed to imagine.
Exactly. And the author aggressively pushes back against this reviewer.
The text calls the reviewer a frog at the bottom of a well who only sees a sky as big as a sieve.
It's a great insult. But the author goes further, claiming such critics are fundamentally evil because they oppress spirituality. Trapping someone in their current reality is the ultimate crime against their potential, according to this framework.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The author's ultimate advice to the student is, visualize it, your wish will come true.
Right.
The mind directs the feet. You can't walk west if your mind wants to go east.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the author's ultimate thesis is that limiting ourselves to reality makes us slaves to it. If you believe existence determines consciousness, you are stuck surviving like an animal.
But by letting consciousness dictate existence, we transcend reality. Which brings us back to those 36-dimensional spaces you mentioned earlier.
Yes. When you elevate your consciousness to the point where it dictates existence, you decipher the mysteries of time and space. The text claims this allows us to access 36-dimensional spaces, where we can die and be reborn.
Wow. It is the ultimate liberation from the physical trap. Believing existence determines consciousness is the conventional thinking of animals surviving in pain.
While believing consciousness determines existence is the unconventional thinking of sages, gods, and Buddhas opening up a sunshine avenue to the future.
It forces a total reframing of the responsibility we hold over our own minds. The author tells us that every artificial thing around us, the phone in your hand, the room you're sitting in, the structure of your city, is just a physical shadow of someone's past imagination. It's literally just a frozen thought.
Exactly. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. If the world you exist in today was built by the consciousness of yesterday, what specific reality are your thoughts building for tomorrow? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and keep questioning the world around you.